Right, so let's start with some context here. Now, the OVA era usually is considered to start in 1983. That's the kind of beginning, the sort of slow loop of it. Dallas is usually considered to be the first commercial OVA, at least. There's some maybe inappropriate cartoons we may know, we may not know, that might count beforehand. It really depends. But like the early period is quite slow. I think what people notice, at least in the industry, is with Dallas especially, they go, oh, that actually sold quite well. This method is definitely a vehicle what we could use. And you start to see that. But the thing is, it takes time to make animation. So you have this kind of period where I think a lot of studios are starting to think about OVAs. And even bigger companies like Kitty Film, King Records, and probably Bandai as well. They all start to like ponder on this idea of like, oh, we could sell more direct-to-video stuff to people directly to an audience, and it can be quite successful. So 83 into 84, there's a small portion of them. You probably have more illicit material, which we're probably not covering here. That's probably another rule. I'm not really doing like hard. There's this separation between hentai and OVA, and like there's a line somewhere in there which is a bit hard to define, but we're mainly covering stuff on the OVA side, because if you add hentai into the biz, that's another fucking doubling of some years. There were more like illicit material OVAs in 1984 than there were ones that didn't have it, basically. But when it comes to 85, that's when the floodgates basically opened, and I think all the setting stuff up had began in 84, started coming out, and you just had a whole wave of titles, and some of them did pretty damn well for that time period. I think Birth is considered the best selling in 84, and it didn't sell particularly great. But like in 85, you get things like Megazone 23, which sold really well for the OVAs at the time. Estimated sales somewhere between like 28 to 35,000 copies around that period, depending on what source you're looking at. And that probably doesn't, it's hard to say. The 35 might count rentals, but yeah, it was a pretty big number for what is a very niche sort of like area. I don't imagine most of these sold that well though, but it did show there's a capacity, as well as Dallas, because Dallas was probably hitting about 20k after its first year. But there's this capacity here that was growing and growing and growing, and you could hit an audience directly, and you could sell these things, and you could make stuff that you wouldn't be able to make on television. That's where we're at right now. This is the floodgates opening. This is what we get, and it's going to be a doozy. Okay, actually, we're going to talk about Chocolate Panic straight away. And that's going in, oh, fuck, what have I moved? This one's going in trash, straight up. There are some things about it. I was going to have an E and F, and I think originally this was supposed to be an E or low D, I think I said. It really depends. It depends how I'm feeling, how moderate I'm feeling on this one. It could go in either one. I think the issue here I have with Chocolate Panic, there's some things about it that are worth talking about. You know, it's technically... I called it a experimental fever dream minstrel show, because that's what it is. It is an experimental fever dream minstrel show. There's not a consistent, necessarily thorough narrative. It's more like the sequences that are stitched together, which are all kind of their own sequence. There's some interesting experimentation there. It looks like they're using video effects, so early VHS video effects, maybe even CG, or they're at least emulating the idea. There's some wireframe stuff here, which I assume might just be emulation, because doing proper CG at this point, there is some that you start seeing, like digital stuff, but I think that they probably used it at a more minimal on this one, let's say. But yeah, that's the kind of thing here that like Chocolate Panic is interesting in some regards because it's allegedly, I think supposedly confirmed, was first Gainax anime that they ever produced. Though it's also under the banner of Tezuka Productions. I'm not sure who the mangaka was, but I guess if we want to get into a history lesson of this, from what I understand, during the 80s in Japan, there was a kind of like, how would you put, like a minstrel craze? I don't know what would be the word. Maybe like racist caricature craze, where a lot of these things that were at that point kind of getting like banned in other countries, they sort of found their way to Japan as trinkets. But maybe the context for some of them was a little bit lost about what these trinkets were representative of. And it sort of, you see it a little bit around in the 80s especially. And over time, there were focus groups who actually sort of started bringing up this as a resistance point, and then that sort of stuff started to like go down again. It sort of has this sort of pit and then it sort of swerves out. But there is this sort of small pocket where it was just kind of there. It's like, oh, they're cute mascots. But that is the character. Oh, I don't know if I even want to call them main characters because they are kind of just strange characters in this experimental animation showcase, basically. But yeah, they are kind of like racist caricatures, you could say. And it's just very odd. It's a very odd mixture of things. It feels a bit like a melted, like 80s MTV commercial. So like that sort of energy is within it, but it's also sort of corroded and strange. Historically, I think there's some semblance there, but I'm not particularly thinking it's something I would recommend to people to watch. So depending on how nice I'm feeling, it's either low D or in the trash tier. So right now, I'll probably leave it there. We'll see how we're feeling a bit later, maybe. There is some cuts, I think, from Canada. Like, I think the Canada era animators are on this, so there is some like small, interesting cuts here and there. But the overall piece itself, as a wider piece of media, I mean, it's 25 minutes, so it's not like you're going to lose a lot of time, but I don't think it really structures itself around much of anything. Well, this is like, I believe this came out in 85, and this is probably the beginning of Gainax. It was probably commissioned. I mean, since it was partially, by the look of it, I think produced by Tezuka Productions, Tezuka knew some of the Gainax people, so I wonder if it was kind of like a gig of convenience, where they started that studio and used that favor to get them on, like, but the thing is, they're not credited as Gainax. It's kind of the thing where, like, I think it's because it's probably outsourced work, basically. So I don't think they actually got a proper credit in the credits, if I remember. I didn't see their name in the credits from what I remember. I don't know. Maybe it was in katakana or something. They hadn't got the logo yet, maybe. But yeah, it's kind of like more quiet now because of the source materials. They don't tend to bring it up very much. But obviously, Gainax is dead now, so it doesn't really matter either way. Safe to say, this one to me is fascinating, but I'm going to put this in the trash situations as well. Now, I'd heard of the infamy of Twilight Nora, but I don't know if I'd quite understood why it was so infamous. I knew there was like a sequence that was like, oh yeah, this sequence is kind of like unfinished. But then I like watched it and was like, oh no, the whole thing is unfinished. Oh, okay. Oh, those poor bastards. So yeah, Twinkle Nora, the experience of coming into it, I was pretty blind. I'd already watched the first Nora OVA at this point. And if you can say anything about the first Nora OVA, is that like it's a pretty competently made OVA. Like it has some nice animation cuts. Nora is like a charming character. There isn't really much going on in it. I don't think it's like great material, but like it hits the beats, there's a story, and it kind of like resolves the story somewhat. And you go on your way, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that was a thing I watched. That was okay, I guess. But then this one is like, it makes less sense in a way, because I went from that first Nora, and in the first Nora, she doesn't have magical powers. She doesn't seem to have magical powers. She doesn't really bring out that. It just seems like she's very good at talking, and has like, it's sort of charisma that lets her do things. And she's like a character. But in this one, it's like, she has like super magic powers that are never really explained. I don't even know if they need to be explained, but she just has them. And she's like omnipotent. And it feels like a trickster god playing terrible jokes on a society who's not ready for them. But they, instead of doing anything meaningful with that, they just are a bounty hunter. It's a very weird combo of things, to put it lightly. But legitimately, out of all the stuff in 85, there is definitely some parts where productions fall apart in 85. We can kind of see how OVAs instantaneously became, oh, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Maybe this pipeline is not such a good idea. You can tell it straight away. 84, I didn't really notice anything like this, necessarily. I think the ambition of Birth meant that some parts of it felt a little bit rough around the edges, but I didn't feel like it was totally unfinished. There were certainly elements of it that were probably a little bit more slapdash. But in 85, you really start to see, especially with longer episode series, how second episode, third episode just completely shit the bed, or just outsourced to a different studio, maybe abroad, maybe somewhere else. It's always hard to tell. But they just look different. They feel different. They are not bordered like they used to be, and it just nosedives. And the most confusing part to me is why they released both Nora and Twinkle Nora in the same year. I don't know if there is an actual answer for this, but I was just baffled. I was like, why would you release both of these in the same year? Because this one is obviously not finished. You could have waited it out until next year. Like, the first one came out in the beginning of the year, and the last one came out at the end of the year. I was just like, the Nora heads cannot be this intense. They cannot be like, give us Nora, or let us die. Because that's how it feels to me. I'm like, who is this enthusiastic about Nora? I mean, maybe there was back in the day, but they can't have been fucking charging the studio or something. I'm assuming they just ran out of money. I came into it, and there was that moment, right, when I said, oh, it's just unfinished, because the beginning of the OVA, it just doesn't have any in-betweens. So it starts the OVA going, and you kind of get through the credits, and then there's just no in-betweens. And I was like, instantly filled with dread, because I was like, oh fuck, is this whole thing just unfinished without any in-betweens? Like, none at all? Because I was like, this is getting really grating to watch for just like a couple minutes. How the fuck am I going to get through the whole thing? And I think the one nicety of it, I don't think it's very long. I think this one's either 30 or 40 minutes. The other one was longer, I know that much. I think it was just 30 minutes, Twinkle Nora. But even in its story, like, functionally, the story of this one is just less cohesive to the previous Nora. I'll probably have to do the next Nora afterwards, because I've been talking about it so much. I'll do like a double feature here. Because she's doing a bounty hunter mission, and she needs to deal with a fucking wizard. Because there's just wizards, right? There's space wizards in this universe. And he's a big, bad space wizard guy, I guess, who has a big evil brother or something who assumedly is a sex pest. Neither here nor there. But shit just happens here, right? But you have this opening sequence, and I came in so confused because during this whole non-in-between opening, I guess it was almost like a terrorism thing. I guess it was like a kidnapping. Nora like winks, and she turns somebody who was a hostage into like a horrible creature that then vanishes. And I don't know what the fuck Nora did there. I don't know if she just killed somebody when she transformed into it, or I don't know what her magical powers are, because this is the first time I've ever seen Nora have magical powers. I'm coming into the universe a bit like, oh yeah, I watched the other Nora, I kind of know what's going on. And I watched this and I was like, wait, what? Because I was like, what the fuck just happened? Like, did she do that, or did that happen on its own? And instantly lost. Which is ironic, because I should know more than most people, being someone who's already watched something from the prior part, but I digress. Ultimately, the story is very loose. Occasionally, the animation feels like it was never corrected. That happens quite a lot. There's a lot of animation that just feels completely uncorrected. Then later on, there is the dance sequence that I think it's most well known for, where like, I think for key animation pieces, it looks fine, but like it doesn't have any overshoot, and it doesn't have any in-betweens, and that's what makes it confusing, because it's like, it feels like it's such a long sequence that the episode is setting itself around that this is going to be like a really nice animated dance sequence. And there's a little bit earlier in the episode where the character is doing that dance sequence with in-betweens, and it's like, oh, so that's what it's supposed to look like. But then you look at it in this long sequence, and it's like, oh no, oh, okay. That's interesting. I feel bad for whoever made this. I'm not even sure I checked the studio, but like, obviously some nightmarish position had put them in that. I don't know if they went bankrupt. I don't know if they ran out of money. I don't know if the producers were just like, you got to just ship it. And it was just like, well, I guess we'll just finish it to the best of our abilities. But there is, a good 5 to 15 minutes, maybe, depending. I can't even think now. Maybe 5+ minutes of just, we couldn't get in-betweeners to fill in these sequences, and we didn't have the money to correct any of this stuff really either. That's it. It is legitimately unfinished, and the story structure is also kind of nonsensical because of the whole wizard shit, and that there's no stakes when Nora can just like get in any situation and wink, and then it's like, oh, it's okay now. That's it, babe. That's it. It's like, there you go. How can you even make a 60 FPS version of it when you don't have in-betweens to begin with? What are they interpolating? There's nothing to interpolate. You're just gonna have like a goop in between the key images. Even more goop. The one thing I can say, you know what? The one thing I can say about Nora, maybe I should put it, right now I'm feeling that the one thing I can say about Nora, I'll put it at the top of the trash right now. The one thing I could say about it is that, like, I was at least questioning and somewhat engaged the whole way through. I think I was kind of like losing. I felt a bit like I was in a fever dream and losing consciousness after the chocolate one. I was kind of a bit like, oh, okay, when is this gonna? Is this done yet? Is this done yet? Okay, well, after a while, it becomes a bit like a blur. Where like with Nora, right, every scene is a bit like, where's this going? What the fuck's going on? What are we doing here? It also lacks the Moe quality of Nora original. Let's talk about Nora original. Let's put that in the. I'm gonna put that in the decent D. I may even put it up higher. What did I originally rank it as? Let me have a look. I'll see if I can find my original Nora score on here. Solid D, I said. I'm probably good. I'm willing to put it in the higher D right now. Nora original, really Nora original. There's nothing particularly outrageous about Nora original. I think the first thing I noticed is that there was like a CGI opening. This is what I'm talking about here. Where I was a bit like, oh, I didn't know OVAs this early would just like throw the CGI out there, because I was like, that's pretty expensive at the time. There wasn't any studios that dedicated themselves to it. It's usually like institutions. You have to like outsource that stuff. But they had like an opening space thing going on where there was like a CGI spacecraft and some other stuff, like a CGI tunnel. I was like, oh, okay, that's something. And I see that there was a fair few attempts at like early digital animation in these OVAs, which was interesting to see. It's a novelty, let's say. I was like, okay, Nora, show me what you got. One of the first things I noticed here, and I wrote it down because I was like, what the fuck, is that there was like, I mean, I was thinking about the time this came out, and I was like, I guess this came out just after War Games, right? The movie War Games, because I was like, this is kind of forward-thinking sort of hyper-reality shit. And I was like, this is probably just a reference to War Games, right? But they had a situation where you start in some punk area. I mean, there's a plane sequence beforehand, which is, it's fine. It's like a comedic play. It establishes characters and sort of the character vibe. You get Nora in there, and I think she's charismatic enough. Gets into sort of like happenstance, goofy things happen, some sort of like anti-gravity spaceship shit happens, and it all sets up like the players in this episode, which has a lot more structure in its story and things going on. When you finally get to the place they're going, you go into an arcade, and there's some kid just playing an arcade game, and he's like, was that before or after? I can't even remember now. But it was either one. It's been a couple of weeks now. He's playing a game. It's like a standard arcade game. But then, like, you notice that he's playing an arcade game, which is just drone striking people in real life. And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe they watch War Games. I was just like, that's, yeah, okay, very hyper reality of you, Nora. I see you're ahead of the game on this one a little bit, maybe, or just on time, maybe. Let's say. So this one is a bit more. It functions. There's some guy from a committee who's got a talk to have, and they're going to this place, and there's some sort of AI on this planet who's sort of running amok, and there's a lot of these like self-made disasters. So a lot of the appeal, I guess, in this Nora is that Nora has like she has energy, she's fun, she's a character they were obviously trying to like make the draw of the series, is Nora being like entertaining character. She has like little extra pieces of animation. She just winks and pew pew, and she has little inflections as a character, and I think that all works just fine and good. The key of the animation is that there are some nice like disaster sequences where they actually do have to do some like complex moves and stuff, so it does get a couple nice cuts like that. Ultimately, if I remember right, it's kind of goofy, plays to the audience. It doesn't stand out particularly well, I think I wrote. Now, after watching Twinkle Nora, maybe I want to be a little nicer to it, but I think that's why I'm putting it at the top of D. Where, like, the structure of it is that she ultimately gets to talk to the AI, and she's able to use, instead of no magical powers, but just using her, like, wits about her and conversational skills and her charisma, she is able to talk out the self-destruction of this planet, which was fun to see. Then the robot, like, falls in love with her or some shit. I digress. That busy is a little kooky. I think it was perfectly fine for setting up this sort of... I don't think they set her up as a bounty hunter in this one. She's kind of just like a helper. She just does things. She's just a sort of mythical agent of whimsy. And I think that's fine. I think that sets up perfectly fine. It's fine. That's the nicest thing I can say about Nora 1. It does its job, has some nice animation cuts, has some character, has some interesting tiny little bits, but mostly probably forgettable for most. Later, I thought was really interesting. I watched Later a little while back though, so like I've watched Later a little less recently than some of these. Okay, Later, easy A. Easy A. I think this one's better than Birth. I think Birth is remembered better from that era of these like what would we call them? The Canada School. And this is all that, like, Kameda? Is it Kamade? God, what's the studio called? It's like Kamade, I think, which is like the studio that Canada was like one of the founders of. And it's the Canada School of Animation. I think this one is much better structured than Birth. What Birth had in animation cuts, Later also has, but Later has a structure, and it's not like a crazy and like amazing structure or anything, but the structure has like a beginning, middle, and end. It has a sort of arc for Later about like becoming her own sort of courageous character, her own, beautiful fighting girl, let's say. And it does that, and it's like, that's nice. It has a nice conclusion. She goes into this mythical world and comes out a stronger person, and it's like, yeah, that's your standard kind of like pocket fantasy sort of archetype thing that's supposed to happen. That's good. And the characters in it, fine. I think that the animation, aesthetics, all look great. I think it was probably, I'm right, being more consistent than Birth. I think that actually it's probably more consistent. It feels like they've learnt the lessons from Birth as a production and took that forward in being like more ambitious or more technically proficient or making the right decisions when they needed to. I remember the music being pretty good as well. Had a classic orchestral soundtrack, I think I said here. Oh wait, no, that's a wrong title. I don't know if I remember if I actually talked about that or not. I think there's some interesting subtext in there too that you could probably read in quite nicely about womanhood or that kind of area. There's sort of, because it's like a dream. She goes into this dream sequence, and you could be very like Alice in Wonderland with it in terms of what represents what. I think there's like meat there to chew on and sort of adapt and think about, and it gets to be both like a quirky fantasy story, gets to do its sci-fi shit as well, gets to have big stone guys. God, all these people fucking love Horus so much. Every one of these creators are all like, we love Horus, we need big stone or big wall or big robot guy, it doesn't matter, just big guy. We need big guy for animation spectacle. And Later's like, yep, okay, we're gonna have a big old mecha. But Later's great. Definitely, I would say strong A tier. I don't know if I'm going to call it S. Maybe we'll see how the stream goes, but I think it is the most solid of the A's, and it probably should stay there for now. And it looks great. It really is a continuation. Well done for them. I watched that with a friend. It was a great time. Now, next on the list here. Oh, it's Angel's Egg. What would you look at that? God, I feel like we're getting some real extremes here, because I went through like some of the dregs, and now I feel like I'm going through my top. I'm probably Angel's Egg has to be S. It just has to be. There's just no way around it. Angel's Egg is like legendary, and it's also technically a movie, but I'm having it on both lists at this point. I had it on my movie list before because there's some technicality of it. It was shown in theaters, and if you're going to see it these days, it's in theaters, and it's obviously in widescreen, so it was designed with that kind of in mind. But also, it was made to be on the video market specifically. So it was marketed as an OVA. It was sent on the video thing, even though it was the wrong aspect ratio for TVs at the time. So I guess it would have been letterboxed, but. And it also, I think that might have been some of its downfall, because I think they were talking, I know there's one particular interview from 86 where Oshii is saying, on a CRT, especially back in the 80s, they're not very good. You can't really get all the detail. The detail is you're lost on you. You wouldn't really be able to take in the full image as much as you would on like the 35mm huge projector screen where you get to see all that sort of like atmosphere and it bleeds in. CRT, you kind of lose a lot of that fidelity. There are a lot of people who probably say that it's like dreamy, sleepy, boring or something like that. There's probably going to be people like that. I'm into the atmosphere. I'm into like the reading. I'm into like looking at the different interpretations. It's an avant-garde piece in a way, in that like it doesn't give you I guess you could say Birth didn't have a structure, but Angel's Egg has an intentional structure, but it's more avant-garde in that it leaves you, the audience, to make your interpretation up. And it gives you the tools, it gives you the pieces of information that happens, and you have to think about what you think happened or what you think the ending represents. You have to like engage with it on a level where something like Birth has an ending which is like kind of confusing and irrelevant, but it's not something that necessarily is like you have to engage with it. It's just like, everyone blows up. Like that's where they're going. It's like it was kind of just like the train of which it fell off the cliff. Later has a very clear structure with an A, B, and like an idea of where things are progressing. Angel's Egg has a lot of symbolism, a lot of iconography that you can interpret however you want to, and that, I think, feeds its discussion for years, and it's a grassroots piece that has become more popular over time and now has having its victory lap finally with its official English releases coming up soon, as well as it's been going screened at theaters. We're going to have that, like, there'll be a Blu-ray, there's probably going to be another screening for people when that Blu-ray comes out. It's all popping. It's all popping. This is the year for Angel's Egg. It took 40 years, but it finally got there. I imagine it probably made its money back by now, just because it wasn't very... Look, it didn't cost very much to begin with, but, you know, it wasn't ever like a massive success, but it's had... That cult, I think, has kept growing. And I remember when I was reading about the first French showing, and it was like these two creators, you know, it's like Amano, known best for Final Fantasy these days, and Oshi, finally having that sort of like, that like, yeah moment where it's like, these French fucks get it. They get it. These fucking critics, they're the audience. They're the audience. Finally, the right audience is in front of this piece, and they're engaging with it, which they just didn't get in that time. Which is kind of, it's a shame of like when you make something, right, as a medium, is that like you want it to find its audience, but it's not always that simple for something to find its audience. And not even a failure on the piece. It can be a failure on its distribution, it can just be a failure on time. And it can be a failure on the systems that be. That like sometimes it takes a little longer for a piece to find its audience. Because things are always in flux, right? You got some pieces that didn't do, you know, I'm thinking like Moby Dick, right? Moby Dick and its era was not really... People didn't really give a shit about it, but it was like later that people were like, oh fuck, Moby Dick, this book's kind of goated actually. And that was like, it had, some of them has to represent it to be like post World War One. This thing was written before World War One, and then World War One happened. They were like, oh fuck, no, actually maybe this is cool. Like you have those moments where stuff like that happens. Well, I mean, it depends what uninspired is, right? There are definitely movies that are bad that also have cult followings because of their badness, because of their sort of commodification. There are many showings like that. I mean, there's, you know, Showgirls could be an example of something that was like completely unhinged. The Room, you know, Birdemic. There are many examples of like movies. What about like one of the more classic ones? What was it like? Was it Plan 9 of Outer Space? You know, that sort of stuff where like these are, some of those are a bit more independent, but there are probably bigger ones which people could easily bring up as examples, especially like big theatrical movies that like bomb terribly and are like so trite that it becomes almost a game in itself to like look at. Like there are definitely stuff like that. I am happy to see it again in the theatre. I've seen it once in the theatre, Angel's Egg. I'm happy to see the new version in the theatre. Hopefully they've fixed the sound levels. Maybe they haven't, but like it was so fucking loud in my ears when I saw it. But I'd like to see it again. I'd like to see it in a bigger theatre, if possible, with with I don't know, 7.1 surround sound audio now instead of whatever I was listening to, which was probably like two channel stereo, because it was probably from the old Blu-ray. But if they want to make a surround version of it, which I'm assuming the 4K version probably has some kind of more wider thing for cinemas, I'd love to see it at some point. I don't know when I'm going to get the option to, but you know, I'm all game for it. But I'm happy to put that in S tier. I think that it's a very special piece, probably polarizing, but I think it's something that talks to me personally in a way where many others didn't. And I feel that there's such a guttural response to me when I remember I first saw it. And, you know, it's not for every occasion, because there are times when I could be like, I'm not really in the mood right now, you know? I've seen it recently, I'm fine. But, like, there, you know, when you're in that right space for it, when you're in that right position, maybe with the right audience, I think it's really nice to show it to other people. I think that's actually some of the allure of Angel's Eggs, to be like, because it's so obtuse in a way, or so, like, it hides its cards so well. Like, it's kind of interesting to show it in front of someone and see how they react and what they take from it, and just sort of come into it from that and be like, what did you think? Like, that kind of experience I think is interesting, and I think that's what gives it such a amazing cult and grassroots audience, where people want to discuss, they want to think, like, what would you think of this? How would you take that? Like, just having someone and be like, I want to show this to you. Like, that's what this is perfect for. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like someone like John Carpenter, people bring up in the chat, like John Carpenter had a lot of films that weren't particularly raved about on their release. I think The Thing is one of them, where I think The Thing was a bit too dour for audience in 82, especially the same year E.T. came out, where people would be like, oh, okay, that was a bit grim. But now it's obviously a classic. But there's a couple examples that where, you know, you're a little ahead of the curve, you're a little ahead of the tone of the day, where it may take a little while for people to really like start to gravitate for that. And I think Angel's Egg is very much an example of that, where I think the audience at the time, there probably was people who were into it, but just there was a lot of just what the fuck is this, and this ain't what I want. And it just wasn't, it wasn't what people were asking for in 85. They wanted this, they wanted Dirty Pair. Dirty Pair, I'm willing to give, I think I gave it a top C. I think that was a solid C situation, because I've seen enough Dirty Pair to know that they can do better. That is my perspective on this one, where I was watching and being like, oh, I was coming to it thinking, oh, this would be a fun time, and it was fine, and it was fun enough, but I was like, there is better Dirty Pair out there. I've seen the movie as well, and I was like, that is much better than this. I was just thinking maybe this is because it's the beginning. I guess it's the beginning of this series of animation where I'm like, there's probably room to grow. But I was feeling like, I don't think it's as good as the other ones. It's got some things about it. It's fine. Its character dynamic's still there. It's still, but I don't think this premise is as engaging as it could be as other ones, they've had in the past. So I'm willing to leave it in that sort of stronger C, coming towards the light B kind of era. That's where I'm putting. I don't know if I have any other notes here about it. CGI as well. This was another thing. I was like, oh, CGI Vortex, another example. I was like, that we're really seeing a whole new era out there, aren't we? I think I just say, yeah, it's basics, gets the basics across. But I think it's there. But it has 50 minutes. I think it is. I'm saying here it has 50 minutes, and maybe that's not enough time to develop as much as it could have or do more with. I just felt like the premise was a little undercooked. I mean, the movie has a lot more time, and I think the series has time to do whatever it wants and fit in that sort of era. But yeah, I feel like Dirty Pair can only go up from here. That's really my perspective. I think it's fun. Maybe some people like it more than I will. But I feel it was decently solid. I think that is affairs of Nolandia. I don't know, it's Dirty Pair 1985, but I think there's sometimes a mini thing under it. But I think sometimes it's just credited as, the first OVA, Dirty Pair 1985. Let's just say, yeah, whatever Dirty Pair came out in 85, that was an OVA. Bavistock. Now, this is an interesting one. This comes from... I think it's multiple studios. I think Kameda of the Canada School studio worked on this to some degree, but I think there's also a different studio. I think it might be Unicorn and Kameda. It might be a joint thing, because Unicorn was a short-lived studio who only did a couple things before they sort of like crashed and burned. I think they may have some billing on this as well. But Bavistock is... Giant might be there as well. I think there's multiple people on here. It's hard to tell which episode it was which, really. Yeah, so it was Kaname. Oh, Kaname. Okay, so it's Kaname and Unicorn. Yeah, so I think Unicorn may be in the main studio, but it's hard for me to tell. But the thing with Bavistock, right? Bavistock is 2 episodes, and it is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, where productions fall apart later on. Bavistock, the first one... In a lot of ways, I was kind of willing to give it like a soft, light C coming into D, right? So it's kind of at the bottom C, where I was like, this feels like a strand of plot points that aren't even connected. You have this jailbreak at the beginning, and then you have a prison that's the next bit. It's like this person's in for murder or something, but they never really they never really go into that whole story about like did he murder somebody? And then there's a boxing match. So you're in prison, then it's like, oh, it's about boxing now, and they have a box off, and then the girls come in, and now it's like a heist, and they're bringing this person out of the prison for some reason. It's just like, slow the fuck down. But then one of the other people they bring out of the prison tried to betray the other dude just a second ago. He was going to fucking get him killed. And now it's just like, well, now they're friends. And it's like, what the fuck is going on? This is moving so fast, and these plot points are so disconnected and never get explained. I was half expecting this one dude to be like, betray them. Because I was like, oh, they're setting him up to be like, out for himself, but then it's like that never happens. I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're just forgetting about that a bit, where he was going to kill you for the money. Okay, I guess he's just family now. Okay, but I mean, and then there's a race, and it becomes like fucking Episode 1 Star Wars. And I was generally thinking at times, like, I wonder if the people who were making Star Wars Episode 1 saw this and thought about the pod races. Because I was like, this is kind of structured like the pod races to stuff. And I was like, well, I guess that could just be hot rods and shit. And I guess there could be a lot of influences there. But I was like, generally thinking at times, like, yeah, these are kind of like, it's a dangerous race. Everyone's in like little things. They do it around a course in a foreign planet. I was like, mate, was this pod racing before pod racing? But then a little bit later on, I was like, I guess when it gets into the sky stuff, it doesn't have 100% to do with it, but I could see the similarity. I could see the familiarity. I know the people who work on Star Wars are fucking huge nerds, so I know they took in a bunch of anime. Definitely some of the CG people, and the concept artists, they've definitely seen a lot of tapes in their time. It all came together okay. There's some psychic power shit. At the end, I was kind of like willing to be like, you know what, I can see how this could work in the future. I was like, there's a premise here, kind of, after you get past all the fucking changing the story structure every 2 seconds. I was like, there's a ragtag group of people, they get into situations and they find their way out.
yeah, that can be fun. That's, you know, your stereotypical kind of setup and that thing. And I like that kind of setup. So I was kind of like, it had kind of won me over a little bit by the end of the episode where I was like, okay, yeah, your threads don't make any sense, and animation sometimes has some moments, and characters are kind of up and down, but I could get behind this. And then episode 2 happened, and it's like, oh, this was outsourced, or this shit looks like shit. And the story just falls apart, it seems, and it's like they just completely different tone, completely different thing. They've kind of like completely. It feels like episode 1 didn't happen, and it's just, oh, okay, and it looks bad. And I was like, oh, okay, well, never mind then, never mind. Another one of those sort of crash and burn situations that we're gonna see where episode 1 I can get behind. Episode 2 is just nah, it looks bad. Doesn't have any of the charm the original episode had, which was holding together the complete frayed story that it was. Yes, Fandora will be on it later, because that's also another kaname, which will come up later. Fandora, again, in a lot of ways, Bavistock and Fandora, not Fedora, have some similarities in setup. It is that kind of like space adventurer. Bavistock has the ability to, you know, it has like, I guess, somewhat benefit of having more characters to sort of bounce off of. Like, it has a core cast of 4 characters that don't really get too much exploration, but there's room to add on to. Where Fandora has like an annoying sidekick character, and then her, and then there's like a new character that's introduced every episode. Will we get to that? We'll probably get to that eventually. It's on this list somewhere, I swear. This is a one where I think overall, this is probably D. Episode 1 is a solid C. So this is the thing here where it's like D, C. If you watch just one episode, you can come out and be like, yeah, I think it got me by the end. That's a C. That's probably better than Bavistock's first episode. Maybe around the same. Yeah, probably a little bit better. They're kind of on the same level. They're kind of similar things. I would probably say it has more going on for it, maybe, than Bavistock. It just is a little bit more coherent. Overall, though, it's going to be in D. And I don't know, maybe Bavistock, am I being too nice on Bavistock? Because that second episode sucks. But I guess it's like 50-50 on that. I'm willing to give Bavistock a bit more. I don't know. It's really hard for me, because I thought the thing with Fandora is episode 2 is another one where, like, this is the first time I remember going through this where I was like, episode 2 fell apart so badly. The boards were terrible. The story was fucking nonsense. And it was so much worse than episode 1. I was aghast. I was like, this has fallen so far, and there are so few cuts that are actually functionally at any level of the first episode. But then episode 3 has a character I fucking hated, and I kind of just lost interest, because episode 3 just feels like, oh, we need to kind of quickly get the story together and tie it up. But I was like, oh, that's not interesting. I think the premise of Fandora, maybe it pisses me off, because the premise of Fandora is solid in that, like, it's like, yes, beautiful fighting girl, or she's got the transformation powers, she has a sidekick who can transform, and she goes and does anything she wants in space. That's a great premise to set up, and you could do so much with that. And it's just like, after episode 1, it's like, oh, you just didn't do anything with it. And this just doesn't live up to the potential. So maybe I'm more disappointed. But maybe also because it's one more episode, it's like there's more shit than there is good stuff. But I think episode 1 is fine. I think there's some really good animation cuts. I don't think it's amazing overall, but I think there's enough in there where it's like, yeah, there's like a wrestling bit. I kind of prefer them where I think there's a kind of a level here which some of these OVAs have, where it's like you have a character like Fandora where it's like she's obviously supposed to be competent. She has a power to transform, and she can do things on her own, and you know, she can transform, and she's competent in that way. But she often gets into situations where it's a bit like, man, you kind of suck right now. You kind of suck. It's like, it's that kind of like bit where it's like, oh, I guess she needs to be rescued now, and then she'll get her thing back, and now she can do the thing. And I see that there's a couple that do this, and I get a bit tired of it, and I'm like, can't she just be like good at stuff, or like fucking figure it out? I guess just I'm getting a bit bored of the whole like, oh no, I don't have I can't use my tiara and sword, so I guess I'm no good at stuff now, and just oh no, that's not good. And then her assistant has to be like, I'll save you. I'm a bit tired of that. It doesn't do it for me. But like I said, episode 1, definitely the best of it. If you're gonna watch any of Fandora, that I think the design for Fandora is also quite nice. I like her character design. But yeah, Bavistock and that feel very similar. They feel very similar. They have a very similar vibe. It's a similar kind of like camaraderie to them. It's so difficult for me into thinking about which one is better, because like I said, episode 1 of Fandora is better than episode 1 of Bavistock, but episode 2 and 3 of Fandora, it's really bad. So they're in a similar proximity. So there you go. So yeah, we're starting to like build this out a bit now, at least. So we're starting to build out a little bit of a shape here. This which I'm appreciating, that the tier is having its starting to come together a little bit better. Now let's see if I can find the next one on the list. My notes for it. Lun Flies into the Wind, I think is the English version of the title. This one I thought was very interesting. Maybe not for the reasons. Maybe not for the reasons it was intended to be. Somewhat intended to be, but this one is a very interesting. How would I even put this? So, Lun Flies is a amazingly forward-thinking breakdown of moe and this sort of like 2D romance. It more so than maybe it was intending to be. I had to check this up because I originally thought it was actually an anime original episode. This comes from the Tezuka Stories line book series. I've covered one last time. I think there's another one somewhere. I'll probably cover the rest in 89. This technically was made in 85. I don't think it was actually released to the public, though, until 89. But for its time, it's even the original story, because this definitely was based on a manga. I originally thought it wasn't, but I found images from it, so it must have been. So that one might have came out in the 70s. But it's a really interesting breakdown of this, in that, like, this is about a boy who doesn't fit in, who doesn't get on with people, who doesn't really have any friends, but he falls in love with this coffee poster. This poster of a young girl speaks to him on a very personal and big level, and he becomes transfixed with it, and he becomes really, really obsessed with it, and he takes it, and he starts talking to it, and it becomes like this character in his head that he's talking, he's communicating to the poster. It seems like only he can communicate with it. I don't think this is a magic poster. I think this is a, like, relationship he's created, almost like an imaginary friend, but he is in love with this poster. And it is a fascinating kind of breakdown of that, and the sort of mentality of moe from a lot of different angles, even like the more critical angles you might see that would have been brought up during this period of time, in that, like, the boy is very possessive of this poster in a way that, like, he while in one hand he is in love with it, it is still an object to him, and he still has prescience over it in ways that, like, the poster will ultimately kind of bend to do what he wants. And that's why I feel like there's kind of in that imaginary aspect of it, where originally the poster's like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave the wall. And he's like, fuck that. Then he just takes it off. Like, okay. He's like, nah, you'd be better in my house instead of on this wall, which will eventually, fall apart or whatever. So there's that element. But there's also, I guess there's a secondary layer to it, which is interesting to me, because the 2D poster exists. This is an actual item. Like, he's fallen in love with this picture, but it is actually a physical object that can age, it can get old, it can get, it can dull in the sun, it can get creased, it can get things, and there is a sort of fragileness to it and how it exists. But this story is about 30 minutes long, and it goes through that trajectory very well, and it gets incredibly extreme at times. This reminded me of the Miyazaki story, where Miyazaki talks about how he fell in love with the girl on the screen from White Serpent. This feels very similar to that idea, like this idea of going to see your girlfriend. This is your fictional girlfriend. This process. What's fascinating, I suppose, about it is that, like, he is a mixture of emotions. This guy is very erratic. He gets beaten up at school. He doesn't have a good school life at times, but his emotions are all over the place. It's very radically melodrama at times, where, like, there is a point where multiple points where he tries to kill himself, all in 30 minutes. So it goes at like such a breakneck path between, like, I've got nothing to live for, and then the poster trying to convince him, don't kill yourself, and it's like, it gets fucking intense. So 79, yeah, for 79 it's pretty forward thinking. But obviously this was stuff that became talked about of this era, about 2D complex. But there are lots of little bits in it which are really interesting in terms of, like, he tries to hang himself on his exercise equipment, and his exercise equipment in the story, in a way, almost represents him moving towards maturity, like self-improvement and maturity. So he has this exercise equipment in his room. So you have the poster, and then you have the exercise equipment, and it's on the exercise equipment that he tries to hang himself. And that's, in some way, I find that a very interesting imagery and iconography about him, like giving up on self-improvement, giving up on moving forward to end it, and like that it's placed specifically on what is considered part of that journey of what they would probably call, I guess, otaku graduation back in that period of time. That's where it's interesting, where it breaks into that idea, like that there was this mainstream opinion that, like, you know, you graduate from being an otaku, you sort of move out of it and you join society, which was short-minded in its own, but it is of its era in a way. But like, it's interesting how this kind of represents that in a way, unintentionally so. Maybe it's hard to tell how much of it's intentional, how much it isn't, depending on who was making it at the time. But the way it handles that's interesting. The way it deals with he starts bringing the poster around with him at one point, but then it starts getting people who want to fuck with him, start messing with the poster, and it's just that sort of fragility is there. One of the twist I thought was really interesting, because within the world of the series, that is a photo of a real girl. So there is this kind of journey he goes on to like uncover who is the girl in this photo. And that was it has a very interesting answer. But the payoff at the end, to me, was a little bit too convenient. I thought the whole premise of it, what to me was interesting, is that like the answer for who the girl is kind of breaks him to his core, because it gives an idea of the difference between 2D and reality, where like 2D is immortal. It is infinite. This person on this photo, the photo may burn, but the original like negative or whatever, or the original versions, it will last in some form if it's preserved. But like that it's a snapshot in time. And what is revealed in some part is that snapshot in time is not contemporary. This is not a photo from now. It was a photo from a long time ago. So it's that sort of like, it's that interesting complex where it's like 2D is immortal, but reality moves on. That person that you thought and you fell in love with, who was someone your age, is a married, much older woman. And that shock is a really interesting conclusion. But it tries to have a kind of like nice ending for the dude, where I was a bit like, I'm not really feeling this as much, where I was like, oh, a little too convenient for me. But I think it does lead into what I guess the premise is supposed to be about, or whatever this premise, like it leads into this, that it is somewhat about graduating, and in the end he has to give up the poster to sort of live in that. And that those are interesting ways of how they present that. And I think it's kind of forward thinking in that way. You could take or give the sort of actual critique it has at the time. I think some of them, I think it's more that the way it explores it is interesting in the end. I think that there is just a lot there, and that it's so fast and so absurd, and it gets so fucked up at times. It just goes from 0 to 11 so quickly. It's an entertainment on which is why I was like, yeah, Light B. I think that was a fun time. I think the premise is actually really interesting to look into and talk about, and how it interprets that, and how it is somewhat forward thinking, in how it's adapted that to unintentionally or intentionally so represent the era that it's from. No, it doesn't. It doesn't have anything to do with the adult woman in the end. The convenience is different than that, but it's a little. I feel like, you know, the premise probably should have been. The premise should have been ultimately that, like, the conclusion that reality is different than the fantasy. I think that would have been a interesting conclusion to not be attached. I think that his attachment to the poster is perhaps in this context maybe a little too unhealthy, and that maybe he should learn to grow past the poster would be a better moral in the end. And it shouldn't be that, like, it shouldn't still be connected to that thread. It should have its own like message about, like, you need to grow past in this case because you become obsessed with this poster, you've talked to this poster, it's become your only friend. Like, there's a room beyond this, there's a room beyond that sort of narrow position, is maybe the message it should have taken a bit more broadly, is what I would have probably went with. This is another B. Did I write anything for this? I might not have actually wrote anything. I watched this yesterday, so I should probably be fresh enough with this one. This is Creamy Mami. Right, so what's interesting to this one to me, I was kind of back and forth. I spent when I did 84, I think I did mention Mami because I'd watched it, but I didn't know if it really counted, because it is kind of both half of it's a recap, and then the other half is kind of a continuation, but it's sort of loose. So I was a bit back and forth about if that even counted. This one is better than the last one, and this one is more standalone. What we have here is, I think this is Long Goodbye, is it called? Either way, I think this is Long Goodbye. I think that's what it's called. Anyway, so this one's interesting for a couple of different ways, I suppose. I know this script is by Ito of Urusei Yatsura of Oshi fame, I guess. You know, he was a collaborator of Oshi. This story apparently was originally supposed to be an Urusei Yatsura movie or some sort of spin-off like that, OVA probably movie. So this original premise was supposed to be for that. They kind of did their own somewhat versions of this story. They have different versions of this kind of premise, where like this whole thing is about making a movie. And I believe this one's 50 minutes, but it's like the characters have got to make a movie. You know, it's going to be the sci-fi epic type thing, whatever the otaku are in now. The character playing the director is called Mamoru, I believe, or Mamo, I think they call him in there. Was it Maru? They call him in such a way where I'm like, this guy's supposed to be a stand for Oshi, isn't he? But it's a fun movie in that premise, but they sort of switch up the way it works in that Creamy Mami has, at this point in the story, she gave up her magical ways. But she starts transforming into this character again. And that's interesting because it's sort of like a werewolf transforming, that like she transforms in the day and goes back at night, but then she ends up getting into this movie, working on this movie, and there's that sort of like, you know, Cinderella element where she can only be in the movie at certain points, and the mysterious Mami case of, you know, she disappears, appears early, then disappears. But there's a lot of fun premising there. A lot of the movie making is interesting. They actually do like breakdowns of some of the special effects, which at the time I thought was like, oh, that's really novel, because it's like, here's a cut as it would be imagined on like a blue screen with wires, and here's the cut as it's cut out, and here's the part where here's the special effects, and here's the part where we put them all together. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cute that they actually like literally recreated that actual premise of movie making, and they do some fun stuff with the movie making premise, like the sort of the sets and stuff like that, and like the characters having disagreements with like the writing, and there's like lots of little bits like that which are quite nice. Overall, there's a very particular scene in it, I remember, where it's like, this is the OVA scene, isn't it? Where they have a dispute with the director, where the director's like, come on, Toots, you gotta take all your clothes off, because it's symbolism or some shit. I gotta have you take your clothes off so you can metamorphosize into this character. And I was like, this is such an 80s director moment, isn't it? This is such a red letter media moment I'm thinking about right now, where, and they kind of just go, we're like, oh, okay. Okay, that was just an interesting insight into the world of filmmaking in the perception of it in the 1980s. But yeah, I think the making of the story, how it sets characters up, is quite fun. In that you have this character who's I guess dating, I think, the producer, maybe gonna marry them, and like they're the star, but then Mami comes in, that kind of creates a tension because Mami. I think that's prior producers connection point, but they become like co-stars, and that's they're both playing like dual roles of robots. I don't know, the premise sounds like the most 80s shit you ever heard. It's like there's like a evil robot version, and then there's the real version of maybe they're an alien, and then they have to fight, and there's laser beams and mecha shit, you know. It's just like that sort of like stereotypical, like whatever sci-fi epic. Star Wars is big, I guess, go for it, and this is OVA, so we're just throwing some action shit in there too. But yeah, it was a nice little story, nice little premise. I think it was better than the original OVA that came out as well. It went for the beach. There was a solution in the end. What I really like about the solution as well is that you know, Creamy Mami, as it would be, or untransformed, she has to figure out how to do the final bits of the movie without Mami, and that Mami disappears, and then she has to use her cunning, her wits, herself to figure out how to do those final shots where they need to get replacement Mami, and then like doing those little bits there. It's like, that's nice. That's a nice conclusion where it's like she can do it on her own. She doesn't need that going in that direction. It's cute. I liked it. I'm going to put that on in the light B category as well. Probably maybe a little bit over Lun there, but yeah, nice, simple, to the point, fun little story. Weird prog. I hate to throw this one at you because it looks like you're excited about What's Michael. I did not care for What's Michael. What's Michael's gonna go like probably here for me. Mainly because I think this is gonna be up to people because I don't think there's anything that's 100% like. Is a mixture of style of humor, a lot of cutaways, and like I do not like stories where people beat like the joke is you hit a cat. Like this character is not as anthropomorphized as like Tom and Jerry, but this is like a real cat that like a lot of the premise is like they whack the cat. And I'm like I don't like that. I don't like this is like a real ass cat for the most part. Sometimes it isn't, but like most of the time it's like this is like a real ass cat like beating and stuff vaguely. Some of the premises are good. I think it depends on the bit. That's the thing with What's Michael to me is it's really dependent on the bit. Some of the bits are better than others, and after a while though I was getting a bit tired of the premise. I thought I'd like it more than I did, and I kind of came out with being a bit frustrated in the end, and a bit more like, when's this going to end? I'm not feeling it. But I could see other people feeling it more than me. It's very much like cat owners be like the OVA. So maybe if you got the right sense of humor and you're a cat owner, you get. I mean, if you're not into cats, if you don't have a cat, you might be just like, all right, yeah, whatever. I don't really care about this. Okay, because some of the premises are a bit like. Yeah, no shit. Of course, a cat won't do what a dog does. Like, duh. Like, what the fuck? Why is it even a bit? Come on. But I think the one I like the most is that there is a Yakuza who has the cat. Like, What's Michael premise is basically like he's like everyone's cat. So like they have all these situations where Michael is and how they deal with Michael. The Yakuza one I thought was quite nice because it was like a funny little premise where it's like this big tough Yakuza guy and he's like Michael and he's like a big cat guy. He's obviously like a cat enthusiast. And it was always a bit like, what if they broke into my house and they saw me with Michael kind of situation. It was like, and I'm fucking petting the cat and I've got my cat pajamas on and stuff. And it's like, that would break my image. And I thought that was like a fun little bit. But yeah, I don't know if I want to dwell on it too long, but it wasn't for me, let's say. Let's see how Michael 2 goes. I know there's a sequel. Megazone 23. This is the big OVA of the year. As far as I know, this was the best-selling OVA of 85. And it kind of hit the premise of what the era was going into, where it's like, there's a bit of mecha, there's some motorcycle, a bit of sci-fi in there. It's like a high-concept sort of premise at times, vaguely on the cyberpunk spectrum. At times, it's got this weightiness. It has some sort of goofier characters. It does have a sort of like an ensemble of characters, a bit of rebelliousness in its bones. And there's an idol as well. It has like everything going for it. It has everything it possibly. No wonder it was so successful, right? A lot of fun animation cuts. I think the characters, for the most part, I think they can be quite fun. I don't like the main guy though. I'm gonna be honest. I think the main guy is kind of weak, and I think some of its stuff with like the romance is also really weak. It's just kind of like written by people where I don't think they've already got the premise down for this, and like it again goes into some producery shit at points, but it feels like its handling is a little unnuanced of it, I would say. For building up a romance, I feel like you need a little bit more there, but I think mainly Mega 23 is sold on its like action and its sort of like fun factor of like things going on, twists and stuff. The biggest problem with 23 is it kind of like it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and then like number 2 doesn't necessarily, that's not, well, it's considered a different OVA, so we'll talk about that a different day, but number 2 kind of does its own thing a little bit, and it feels like it doesn't 100% connect to this version of the characters. It feels like it's kind of up here in a different world, where like Megazone 23, the first part has a particular vibe and energy to it, which I would consider in the B tier. Where in the B tier? Maybe around here. It could be in the middle B maybe. I think it's definitely... I think the parts where it's fun. I think there's definitely some good motorcycle parts in there, and like the motorcycle also transforms. You get some good bits in there for that. Some good little bits of action, and I feel like the ultimate thing with Megazone was a bit like, it's just like the potential movement of the story doesn't really go in a way that maybe people would have liked. I haven't seen the third one yet, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I can tell it's very Macross-esque. Obviously with even the idol. But I mean, it's been a little while since I've watched it, but I'm going off my premises from then, where I was like, yeah, I think that overall, I mean, it's got some problems, but I think overall it's somewhere in the B. Maybe it's a light B as well, somewhere in here, in the B quadrant, maybe in the middle here, somewhere around there. Now, for some reason, I have 2 Angel's Eggs, so I'm gonna have to double check. I will have to double check later about the other one. Let's just I'm gonna put Angel's Egg in the S tier twice. Crazy. So we have double Angel's Egg. So good, I read it twice. Alright, so this one is probably the most obscure on the list, I think. Now, what was the name of this? It had a really weird name. Gotta find it again. It's like a very obtuse name. Yeah. Chuhai Lemon loves Furties. Does not translate into English very well. So this one, I remember putting low D on this one. This one I don't even think was translated when I was watching it. I think that's the only one on the list that I couldn't find a formal translation anywhere. This one I don't think has been released very often. One of the reasons that could be is that one of the most eyebrow raising thing about it is that Teardrops Keep Falling on My Head plays in it multiple times. And I think there's supposed to be some other Americano in there as well, music-wise. But I get the impression that it was maybe not actually sanctioned, and that like it's like they did it because it's like, well, this is never going to America, so they just put it in there. I don't know if they actually had the license. And if they did have the license, they probably only had it for like Japan at a limited time. But if I remember right, I think this was an adaptation of the Fist of North Star's one of his other mangas. It's kind of a fucking weird one, if I'm honest. It's like a crooked kind of cop dating a fucking minor who's a crooked cop in his 30s who's like Madball. Sourceless Madball would definitely be a way of describing it, where like he's dating a minor and she gets in trouble and he has to get her out of it, and he's like a horrible guy and he's a cop. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's probably ways you could do a premise like this and talk about it, but this one, this probably ain't it. I don't think there's anything particularly impactful. The animation's kind of so-so. The raindrops is really the part where I was just like, what the fuck? That part really hit me like a train, where I was like, where the fuck did that come from? Outside of that, I don't have much else to say about it. Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's just obscure. I don't know if it's on their radar. Maybe someone has translated and I just couldn't find that translation, because, I mean, they probably translated in the 2000s, but like, I don't think it's been re-released much either, so I think the rip I'm looking at is probably a Laserdisc or VHS anyway. I'm not sure what it was inspired by, but that was an interesting one, I'll put it that way. Next, okay. This one, I don't even know if this super counts. I saw it on the list. It usually is categorized. I'm trying to remember the name of it now, because this is this is the Midori creator's like his graduation animation project. I believe there is a video release of it somewhere. Deaf Lullaby, right? Is a particularly interesting piece of, like, I would say, sort of like art house independent animation, and I believe it has had a video release in some form, in probably one of his own. But it's probably on 8mm. The way it was made, there's a lot of really good animation cuts in it. I think I was kind of dreading watching it in some part, because I was like, oh, this is like about bullying and shit. I thought, is this gonna be a bit too harsh for me right now? I'm not feeling like a really like nasty piece of work, because Midori is harsh and it's a hard one to watch, but this one is a little bit more abstract, so it's not quite as brutal, I guess, in feeling as Midori, but it does have some moments. But I think that the experimentation, the different mediums it does, just like lots of little bits about it, it had the source. That's what I remember saying when I was writing about it. I was going through the last animations on this list, and I was like, a lot of it was kind of like pretty underwhelming, and I was like, oh god, this is getting a bit difficult to get through. And then this one came out it was like a reservoir in the desert. I was like, finally something good, something interesting. I was like, it's 30 minutes, lots of impactful, interesting animation. It deals with its premise between industrialization and bullying, and dealing with a sort of a weird mix of in between, of experimentation, of trying different types of shots. It went the mile. It went the distance, I will say, for what it was trying to do and what it captured for this kind of story. It kind of reminds me of King of Pigs, which is a Korean animation, which is also about bullying. That's probably a bit harsher than this one too, but that came out much later. Yeah, so this one is a particularly it is a testament for the director's just tenacity of making something, because that's his career basically. Like these kind of projects like Death Lullaby have become his career, and that it's a difficult path to ride, and that his work is contentious and sometimes difficult to release a lot of the time. But he continues to do it. He continues to make stuff. He continues to tell those stories which are a bit more taboo, which usually deal with traumatized people, stories of people who are ostracized by society. And I think I appreciate that he does. But yeah, great work. B, maybe edging in the A, I don't know, but top B, I'd say. This is Tanaka. So this is Urusei Yatsura creator's sort of line of OVAs that were based on some of her short stories, sort of like these, I think it was the Rumiko World stuff, I think it's called, isn't it? And yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Maybe the bottom of C, D, somewhere around there. It tells a very simple kind of premise. I think the benefit of a lot of Takahashi, a lot of the benefit of her stuff is that they have a lot of time. They're usually quite long stories, like these sort of anthology long stories where like they get to do lots of stories and they get to sort of nurture relationships and show characters in different situations. This didn't really have that. It had like maybe 55 minutes. The animation's okay. The premise is simple. It's kind of like the twists of its like romance twist kind of premise, like around teleporting when fires erupt or something. It's a bit thin, if I'm honest. The romance is very thin. There, some of it's in modern Japan, some of it's in like ancient Japan. There's some niceness about it, but to me it was like very forgettable, kind of like fine, like it's alright, but like I think that we could get better. So I'm on the edge of giving it a D, but it was okay. It was fine. Whatever. That's where I'm at. Maybe you've seen as a prototype of Inuyasha. I think Inuyasha does a lot more with it, if that's the case. I mean, it's definitely like, seeds of, later work. You could say it's like a baby work, it crawls so other ones can run. Right. Okay, here we go. Here's another one that we can talk about here. I don't know if I've got much to say about this one. This is Justy. Cosmo Please Justy. This is going somewhere on the bottom tier of, oh god, I kind of feel bad for putting this down so low now. Actually, Nora needs to go up. This is going in the D as well, in that, like, I don't know if it's even fair to put it in the D, but I was, like, completely switched off for this one. The first 5 minutes, I was like, is this going to cook? Because there was, like, it's Pero. The animation cuts were pretty alright. They're pretty decent. There were some cool cuts there. I was like, does this have the sauce? Is it going to cook? And then I kept watching. I was like, oh, it doesn't. It doesn't have it. It's a bit aimless. It felt like, in my mind, maybe because I was watching so many at the time, but it felt in my mind, this is like the premise that adults, parents in like the 80s or 90s had about like Japanese cartoons, where it's like, it's just noise and violence and like action shit happening, and it's like these violent foreign cartoons that don't make sense. I was like, oh, did they all watch Justy? Is that where they're getting that from? Because with Justy, I could be like, okay, maybe, some psycho telekinetic space shit, Phoenix Force almost. I don't even know if they were using that as a reference point, but it was very Phoenix Force at times. But I was just checked out after a while. I thought at the beginning I was like, maybe because it got me hoping. It got me hoping that it was going to be more than it was, that I was just more disappointed in the end and was just a bit shot down, where I was like, oh, never mind. Dime a dozen. There are many, many OVAs like this, and this one did not stand out for me. Nora above Michael, yes. That's not the Twinkle Nora, that's normal Nora. That's probably a contentious one maybe, but that's what I'm feeling right now. I feel like I should give Nora a bit more than that. Right, So let's get to the next. This one I was watching today. I don't know how love position. I do not know how to rate love position. Genuinely, I do not know how to rate love position because I honestly don't know how I feel about it. It's a hard one for me to premise because at the beginning it was another where I was like, is this gonna cook? This could be something. This is the first official OVA made by Tezuka Productions in their new capacity. It is an over-ambitious mess of a story where it is both an alien love story, sci-fi concept, but also a damnation of the Vietnam War. It is so fucking Tezuka in that way. It's also kind of Terminator. So like it's doing all this fucking shit at once where it's like it wants to do all these different things. And I don't know if it can do them all at once in a coherent way. So like I gotta give it like for the effort, for the intent, it's, you know, okay, I see what you're trying to do. I don't know if it lands it. I don't know if it lands it in the end. That is what I'll say about it. So for now, I may end up putting it up in like the lowest part of C for now. I don't know what else to really say about it. The animation's fine, I guess. I don't know if there's anything massively stand out about the animation. It's perfectly, you know, it does the business. Doesn't look out of place. I think there's probably some... I don't think the action really does much, though. I think the premise really sells it, the most of it just being completely wacky, but it is also 90 minutes, and maybe for like an OVA premise, maybe it's a bit too long. It's probably the longest OVA. I think it might be the longest. Actually, later could be longer, but later like feels like it deserves its runtime. Where here, I don't know. Maybe it's just like when they start getting longer, especially with some of the premises, I start checking out a little bit. That's how I feel. It really depends if they can like do it. I don't know if anthropomorphic is the word, but it's like alien white. It's like alien woman who is also made of sludge or something. But she's like, I don't know. She's like telepathic, but she's probably made of sludge or some slime or some shit. But then she can like become like a ghost, but also becomes a physical form. And she doesn't speak English, but she learns a couple words, and she's also like immortal. But then I get the other guy's like Terminator, and he's like literally fucking Terminator, with like silver hair and like red eyes, and he like fucking just goes around killing people. There's like a lot of random shit going on. There's like these two premises that kind of interconnect. That the beginning of the story is about this young boy and his dad, and then they kind of like just drop that, and it becomes about like some dude who's dating a Yakuza daughter or something, or some popular, I don't know, it was either like he was a businessman or he's a Yakuza. It was hard to get a thing. He had like thugs that were on his payroll though, so it felt like he was like a dubious man. Her dad is a dubious man, and this rebellious kid is dating her, I guess. And I was like, why are we okay, I guess new premise, new character, and then at some point there's another third main character when they do flashbacks to his dad. So yeah, it gets a little all over the place. So yeah, it is very sporadic. But yeah, it might be worth watching in a group call, I guess, if you kind of like wanted to kind of ride out some of the more wacky shit. But it's not super wacky. There's definitely been more wacky stuff you could watch from Tezuka. So yeah, I will put it in the C for now. I don't really know. Maybe I need some time to sit on it, but that's kind of like bottom C. I'll leave it there. But yeah, it's like there's like an evil. So to bring in the premise is that there is an alien life form. Okay, actually, this is where it gets fucking insane as well. Thinking about it now, there is an alien life form who is sent by God to destroy the planet, and they don't. And it rides on Halley's Comet to the Earth. And then I guess God sends another one or something next time Halley's Comet comes. And that's the Terminator. So there's like the good alien spirit thing, and then there's the bad one. So like this shit is fucking absurd. And I guess he's sent, I think the message there is like that humanity is in one part, you know, destructive and violent and destroys things. Like Vietnam War, it's destructive. It takes it too far. It destroys things senselessly. But at the same time, maybe there is something to save in this world. So it's like that battle between these two positions. Yeah, there you go. Minky Momo. I feel like this is one that, like, if you're engaged in Minky Momo, you would probably get a lot more out of it. This is kind of like a premise where you don't really need to know anything about Minky Momo. It's kind of like, yeah, magical girl. There's a magical island where people don't grow up. That's the premise. And maybe if you're a Minky Momo fan, you would get more out of it. I kind of was like a bit like, top of C. I can see the entertainment, but I'm not really feeling it because it's not my life. I'm not about that world. So maybe I'm gonna give it a top of C. The last 30 minutes of it is a bit long. That's, I guess, my thing is like it's like 80 plus minutes for the premise. I don't know if it needed to be that long. It's basically like a movie. It feels like it's like a direct-to-DVD movie. Well, direct-to-VHS movie, I should say. But like the last 30 minutes of it is like, oh, this is made for the older fans because it becomes like mecha. It's like mecha animation galore. It's like it becomes like tanks and planes and explosions and dragons and fucking dinosaurs. And it's just like, yeah, okay, this is the part where everything just blows up, right? And it's like, yeah, the animators can just go wild for a bit. And it's like, okay, yeah, if you're into that, then you'll probably like this bit. Like simple, they go to a special island. Her parents go on a vacation, crash on a special island that's like exclusively, people can't go to this island, and then she's got to go. She's got to go to the island and save her parents. And it's like a special world where Peter Pan runs like everyone in this place becomes children forever utopia, and it's another one of those premises where it's like humanity and adults are so destructive and violent, and they run the world this way, but then kids over here, we have a utopia over here, and they start getting bombed by they start getting drone strike by fucking the UN or some shit. It's like, oh my, because they live in like a clouded protective base on an island people can't visit, and I guess the military industrial complex just starts going, fucking drone the kids, drone the fucking place. For what premise, I can't remember. Maybe it's to save people who land along the island, I don't know, something like that. They just fucking blow them up, it's fine. Yeah, they just start drone striking. They just start fucking firing missiles and shit, and they start bringing tanks and aircrafts into this. I forget if there was any particular reason. Either they wanted to colonize the island, maybe, or they wanted to try and save the past. I guess it was to save the children who were maybe important people before they were turned into children. I forget the exact reasons, but yeah, it's all right. It's definitely got some good animation and some fun little bits. There's definitely some good sequences in it, for sure. I'm just maybe not a big Minky Momo guy. It's very, this OVA probably cost 10,000 yen back in the day, so, like, it's obviously made for, like, otaku. Even though the Minky Momo people, like, they don't like otaku, it seems, the way they talk about them, but, like, they still sold them the OVA, though, so they obviously don't, it obviously isn't that bad for them, because they're still, like, thinking, like, okay, but we're still going to sell you the mecha explore children's story with the action and the explosions and the big old crazy shit happening here and there. Like, we're still selling you that. You're still buying this because children aren't buying 10,000 yen fucking VHSs or Laserdiscs. It has to be otaku. Isa 1C? Where, like, this to me is just very middle of the road. Somewhere in here, like, very middle of the road. C tier, maybe D. I don't know where I even put that. It's probably somewhere in here. In that, like, I think it's well animated at times. It's got an aesthetic. I've seen this premise many a time. It's kind of one of the earlier, like, line between erotic and OVA in terms of, like, it's not hentai, but it does have some more kind of illicitly erotic, dark elements in it as well. Where it's somewhere in the middle, I guess you could say. At times, aliens, planet, mecha, other alien, maybe lesbian love. I don't know, a lot of lesbian love shit. It's an OVA. Like, I listen to it and go, yeah, this is like a very stereotypical, like, tick list of OVA premise is here. It's hitting the beats of stuff I would sometimes expect to be in them. And I think the animation cuts look pretty good. It's definitely maybe more competent than some of these, but I didn't think the story really drove home much at all. I think it's probably better out there, really. So, like, I'm kind of like, it's just kind of like flash in the pan for me. But yeah, I don't really feel strongly about. Right, we're getting close to going through most of these now, actually. Rem. I don't know if I actually graded Rem in the end. Rem's a bit hard to grade again because Dream Hunter Rem, originally a hentai. There was a 20-minute hentai version of the first episode, and then it was turned into a more commercial ecchi anime kind of thing, where it's got a good premise, but I think again my frustration with Rem in terms of like it's Dream Hunter, it's like Ghostbusters. It's like she's a dream hunter, she goes in dreams, she deals with mythical situations, and she goes into dreams and deals with them, and she has magical powers and stuff, and I'm just like, oh, they could have done so much more with this premise, Well, like, I don't even know where I ended in it, because I think the first episode, yeah, that's probably fine. Yeah, the first episode has like 2 stories in it. They come together. They're probably the shortest. It's 2 little stories. That one's probably the best of it. But then episode 2 and 3, I think episode 2 feels like it wasn't really properly written out, and it has some like really big logic leaps, and they start to feel like they're falling into a really boring pattern for me, where it's the story as before. It's like she has these powers, but she gets fucked over, and then it's like, oh, she's kidnapped again, and she's on the table, and we're gonna do something to her. But then the Buddhist guy comes and saves her, and then she gets a power, and she does. And I'm just like, I'm fucking bored of that. Oh, can we do something else with this premise, please? And also, she's got magical powers, but she ends up like beating most of these things by shooting in the head with a gun. I'm like, oh, that's so boring. You got like magical dream powers, and it's like you could do anything. Think of something more interesting. She transforms and she gets a sword and shit. It's like, is there more we could do with this, please? I don't know if it was part of Cream Lemon. I don't know if the original was part of Cream Lemon. Was it like an offshoot? I don't know. I mean, that's anime. I think it's Anime R, which I think did both of those. But it's kind of the thing where I'm like, maybe the first episode is probably the most consistent. Definitely probably the best of them. Has 2 premises. I think they do. The second part of episode 1, if I remember, they do like Freddy Krueger. I'm like, okay, there we go. Now we're doing something with the dream premise again. The first one, it's like some evil dream spirit. The second one, it's like, we're doing like Freddy Krueger shit. And I'm like, okay, we can do some stuff with that. But I want them to do a bit more. I just want a bit more. Maybe the new adventures of Rem will tide me over more. I kind of feel like Rem's kind of D, somewhere at the edge. It's somewhere around here. I don't really know if I've got a hard grade for it, because again, I feel like episode 3 to me was really boring. Episode 2, I think, started with some potential, but I felt like the ending kind of like it lost a lot of its momentum. It just kind of became a bit. I felt like the conclusions of the story were not very good, and I thought that the way it got there, the logic loops it falls through, yeah. I don't know, maybe top of D for now. I don't even know if I could do that, because I feel it's so hard for me to rate this, because I feel like this one's first episode is definitely better than any of the episodes of Rem, so maybe I should put it there, somewhere in here. Well, yeah, I feel it's got a premise with more potential than it offers. That's how I felt about it. Yeah, it has like a Freddy Krueger-esque premise. It's like Phantom Thief version of Freddy Krueger, I guess. Which I thought like that one was pretty right. That's honestly, I feel like Rem would work better with like shorter structures as well. Like I feel like it's kind of like it feels like it's like a Saturday morning cartoon kind of set where it's like this is probably 30 to 22 minutes, maybe 40 if on a push, that you could do a Rem premise, and if you wanted it to go expand, you could do like a 2-parter. You know, when I'm thinking about Rem, I don't know, maybe that's a contradiction in me, but I'm thinking the animated series for Ghostbusters went really hard and had a lot of like unique premises with ghosts, and like this is kind of like ghost supernatural dreams, and it's like you could do you could do any of the shit that Ghostbusters was doing, and like Rem could just like do whatever she's got magical dream powers, you know, you can do anything with that. It could have so many different interesting premises, but I feel like the premises they went with were a bit safe, a bit boring, and they didn't have interesting using of dream powers. Yeah, I feel like there's more they can do with Rem, and maybe the 90s version we'll see. If I ever make it to 87, that's always the question, because it becomes increasingly difficult to watch every anime OVA per year as the time goes by, because there just becomes more and more to the point that it becomes almost untenable. You know, these first couple of years are a little easier because, you know, this is 23, which took a while, but like next year is going to be like 33, and it's going to, oh my god, that's even more, right? And then after that, it's like 45, and it just keeps building. So it's going to be difficult. Maybe one at a time, right? One at a time, I can probably slowly build it. I will not be doing a mecha series list from the 70s and 80s. That sounds fucking insane. Like mecha series and 50 episodes per show. That's fucking. I'm not doing that. That's like living through mecha hell. I'm not that engaged. It looks like they're all here. Yeah. Okay. No worries, son. We just had 2 for Area 88. Now this one was a straight banger. This was definitely one where like I started picking it up, and then I was so engaged. It really hit me because I was watching that, like I was like, no, I want to see what happens next. I was really into it. I got really fucking. I think this is what 3-4 episodes, but like this is like the only OVA I swear in this fucking year, and I'm gonna put it in A. I don't know if it's gonna go here or there. For now, let's put it there. They're pretty on peak. They're both pretty peak, right? Area 88 was so fucking good. It was. The only thing you can really say about Area 88 is that it kind of ends on a cliffhanger, but in some ways, I kind of like that. I kind of like that it ends with like you not knowing, because it feels like what he's doing is so fleeting and so impossible for him to survive. It feels like the kind of thing where like you'd never know if he did or not. Like maybe he could have survived going into like an open battle zone, basically, an open war zone, basically, to try and save his comrades. But just very unlikely. It's a very unlikely that he would be able to do it. Unlikely to have the fuel to even survive the battle. So it's so fleeting in that way. And like, I know they made a TV show. I know they made a TV anime eventually, but like it's like a whole thing, and it looks different, and they have CGI planes, and I'm just less than. I don't care about that version. It's this version I'm engaged. It's this specific version from Pero in 1985, which I was engaged in. I don't want to see some other fucking version of the ending, where like it's slightly different, and it's like probably following the manga maybe a little tightly. I don't care about that. It's all about this. This reminded me of Count of Monte Cristo. I was watching this and going, is this Count of Monte Cristo? Whereas like the premise, like the sort of great revenge, friend, betrayal, and there's like that kind of almost revenge element, and then he's stuck in the situation. I was like, there's something here. But like, I don't know, I think the characters are all fun. It really does sort of lead into that sort of like fleeting mercenary bounty hunter. I really liked the reversal though, like after, God, actually, There's one point in this where I thought was like, that's so harsh, but that hits so hard, where he tries to escape. He's going through a desert. He's fucking a dead man in the desert, and he crawls and he crawls and he crawls, and he eventually finds civilization. What does he find? The fucking base. He's crawled all the way from smashing his like trip back to the fucking base. He's like a dog on a leash. He can't even leave. He just fucking, that was such a Sisyphus moment where it's like he almost died in the desert only to have to return to the base and maybe die again tomorrow in a fucking like shootout, ever further away from his goal. And I was like, that's some poetry right there. That is some hard poetry. And the guy that was his friend but wasn't his friend, I guess wasn't his friend but was his friend, betrayed. That guy's so fucking evil. He's such a fucking bastard. And I think he sells that well as like a villain, like that you are gonna fucking hate. Because his goal eventually in the end is just like, I'm gonna fuck your girlfriend. He's like, not only have I sent you to a war zone, I'm also gonna fuck your girlfriend. That's where he's going. It's like, you know, your boyfriend, he's probably dead now. You know, we haven't heard from him from years. You know, why don't you marry me? And then it's like, oh, why don't you sell me your bonds for the right price? And it's like, he's so fucking scummy. It's so good. Oh, it's so fucking good. And again, like I said, I don't even know if I want to know the real ending. I don't even know if I want it. It's just like that ending is so like, that will they, won't they? I don't know. Maybe that feels to me almost like it's a nice conclusion in that, like, how fleeting it all is. I'm sure there's a really nice ending in the end where he probably fucking saves them and he gets to be with the girl and it's all fucking happy or some shit. But I don't know. That might be more boring. Yeah, he definitely aura farms. He's got the aura farm about him, but like I did kind of love that. Like, yeah, that opening scene is just like, yeah, he gets into his room and he just like crying and screaming and smashing shit, and it's just like, yeah, I'm so tired of killing people. But then by episode like 3, it's like, you know what? I could go for killing people. He's like, you know what I could do with more of? Killing people. It's like he got so fucking used to it. It's so harsh in that way. It's like, I'm actually kind of feeling like everything in my life is numb now. All that makes me feel comfortable now is killing people. I'm so used to it. Maybe I should go back and kill more people. It's like, fuck, man, that's harsh. But yeah, that he there's a lot of scenes of him crying at the beginning. There, he's really not feeling it. He's really not feeling himself. Which is there's trauma there. There's real trauma there. And it's interesting to see that, yeah, when he gets out of it, he's like living in like a fugue state, because it's like, I'm out, but am I out? Am I really out? Do I really exist in this world anymore? Am I just a bounty hunter now? Like the people I knew, the people I'd left behind. You know, can I really return to normal life? There's also like, I guess this is like, for the longest time, this probably was the peak of aerial combat you're going to see in anime until like Patlabor 2. I think this is probably like the high mark of like aerial dogfights. I can't really think of anything that's like strictly aerial dogfights outside of this, where it's like, this is where you are. This is like the level. This is a technical level which is really hard to hit, and you know, probably won't be hit again in the same way, in that traditional way. So like until like, yeah, Patlabor 2, I think this is probably like that real high point. And there are a lot more dogfights too, so that there are so many different like events. Also, if you've ever played Ace Combat, this series feels like this was where they were looking at. Like Ace Combat people were like, we want to make Area 88 into a game. That's how it feels. And like obviously it's general dogfights too, but like the actual like the way things are set up, I'm like, yeah, this is what they wanted, wasn't it? The main character has Dracula flow energy. I just want to kill. I mean, he does get to become a very proficient trained killer. Fun fact, I guess, the first time I knew anything about Area 33 is that there is a Super Nintendo shoot-'em-up game called UN Squadron, which I had played in the past, and I had no idea there was like a manga connected to it or anything. I was just like, oh, this is like a game. And then after I was like, oh wait, this looks like UN Squadron. And I found out it is UN Squadron. I was like, oh, well there you go. So yeah, that's peak. That is all four. I think it's 4 episodes. It's the only OVA from 1985 where after the first episode of the OVA, it stays consistently great. I don't think I could say that for any of these other OVAs looking through them. I think the rest of them, it's all like, yeah, I think it's basically all just after the first episode, the production falls apart and they outsource. That's pretty much the premise I have for every single one of these like OVAs. I feel more or less it's just like, I guess Rem didn't exactly get worse looking, but I didn't think the stories were particularly great. It's probably the most consistent though in terms of 3 episode stints. I mean, I could definitely put it at the top of A. Could definitely go to the top of A. I don't know about. It's a hard one for me to really pitch. I guess that it doesn't have a real ending may put some people off. I've kind of come accustomed that there isn't. Oh yeah, also the soundtrack is so good. The soundtrack, it has this huge theatrical like bombastic soundtrack, but it also sometimes brings in like guitar and electronic. So it has this kind of interesting mix where it has like such a big orchestra sound, which really brings up the epicness of like the dogfights, but then also sometimes brings in like guitar and electronics as well. It has like a nice mix of sounds in the series. It really does have a great soundtrack. I think everything about it is just great. Yeah, so I think top A to S is definitely potential there. It was a real highlight, absolutely. Something I've been meaning to watch for years, and then I'm glad I actually did. Is it S? I don't know. I haven't sat with Area 88 long enough. I've seen Angel Take multiple times. I've seen it many times, right? But I have not sat with Area 88 enough to know if it really is S. I think I need the capacity to sit with it and watch it again to really, really understand if I'm feeling the S tier on it. That's what I'm feeling here. Is that like that takes time for me. And I don't know if it has that. I think being at the top of A is a reward in itself. Because S and A here are kind of interchangeable in some ways. But that was so good. Really is like, if you're going to watch one OVA as like a series OVA in 1985, Area 88. You got to be into that kind of thing though. Obviously, like it's about dogfights. It's about like people dying and action and betrayal, and there's some love story there too. It's like a side. I think it's got quite a wide gambit, to be fair. But I think you've got to be into that kind of story as well, where like I could see it might not be for everyone, but like if you like that kind of thing, then I think it was a great time. Great time, great watch. That's all I can say. And we're finishing off. God, I'm getting sweaty now. We're finishing off. I think I'm gonna have to double check my Kindle. This might be the last one. Greed. And this one will be a joy to talk about, to be fair, because I think Greed is so interesting, even though I don't think it's like great. I think it's such an interesting like product of its time. What a strange one. That is how I start talking about this. Okay. Greed is an interesting beast. Greed is obviously a byproduct of birth. And that greed is like a different variation on birth, but made by different people. This is made by the team, mainly some of the team that Tomino would have worked with. So the character designer and director, I believe, is the character designer of Adion. So it has a very particular, striking look on it. This is it wants to at first be almost like a sword and sorcery fantasy story. And it may also be one of the first examples of a blatant tsundere? Like, there's a character in here where I'm like, that's very tsundere. And that, like, this character is very, very of the archetype before. Obviously, that's something that comes much later on, really. But more so the popularization, I suppose. But, like, this is definitely in that wheelhouse. It kind of sets up almost like a D&D game. Like, it has the characters set up. You have, like, the young warrior. You have a barbarian-esque character. You have a magical, I guess she's a sorcerer, maybe, I don't know. I think she has some kind of magical power or something like that. Maybe there's another one, I can't fucking remember now. There's definitely a magic like user. There's a lot of interesting cuts in Greed, and story wise it's a bit over the place in that, like, it starts as like a sword and sorcery fantasy. You meet the cast members, and then it gets sci-fi at the end, and then falls apart and turns into IDN by the end, and goes a bit like the birth path. So it does start to, like, again, like, sort of turn into like existential space lunacy by the end of it. I can't remember if there's actually a nice ending or not, but they like fight some giant fucking god knows what creature of consciousness. I think the cuts are really fascinating. I think there's some parts in it which I thought stood out to me were, there are bits where, how would I put it? There are bits where it becomes almost like a Famicom game, in that, like, it does like the side-scrolling thing where, like, the character stays in one continuous perspective on a flat screen, and they just it's a side scroller that you see the characters from that angle, and they use some fun things with that. Like, there's definitely multiple parts where they like to play into that, and I think it's definitely sort of Famicom inspired imagery. At the beginning as well, I think there was a good atmosphere towards the beginning of the story when they're kind of like in the jungle where they live. It starts with a very Horus Prince of the Sun premise. You know, it's like a dying relative and then sent out to like help. He's sent on a mission by a dying sort of member of family. You know, it's very Horus, very classic sort of this archetypal story. And he's a young coming of age man. Was there anything else here that I need to talk about? Fantasy. Apparently there's a novelist on this one who, maybe it's a bit more coherent at times than Birth can be, but I don't think it's as good as Birth overall. Some parts I remember hearing through the translation that, like, there's some very like esoteric dialogue which didn't translate well, or was difficult to translate. Some like very haiku poetry-esque dialogue that might really be better served to a native who's got some experience in like literature. Because yeah, some of the dialogue is a bit esoteric in that way, a bit flowery, like super flowery, I suppose, in an olden sense. I mean, I thought it is Adion. Like, I think that's how you... Is that not how you... I don't think you can say Ideon. I thought it was Adion. I would say that overall, Greed is an experience. It's probably not an experience that, like, makes it to the end unscathed, but it is an experience nonetheless. I think some of it, maybe... Probably for me, it's probably around here. Where, like, Greed is interesting as a piece of history. It's kind of a wonder how it got made to me, in the same way Birth is. But it is just like a vehicle for, you know, talented people within the industry, especially people who worked on a lot of mecha in the past. And I think it does have some character to it, even though I think some of it is very stock. I feel that it has a weirdness about it that kind of makes it stand out a little bit more, even if I don't know if it completely lands what it needs to in the end. But it does have that sort of same kind of feeling of we're just throwing this at them and they can just do whatever, which Birth also had. And I can appreciate a project like that on that level. Yeah, I could see why someone wouldn't make it through the whole thing. Maybe I'm a bit more engaged on it just from the curiosity of it. But I do like the opening. But I don't know. I feel like, yeah, by the end, it kind of becomes its own mess. But I am interested in the fact, I do think there's a lot of great cuts as well. There is definitely a lot of like really good animation cuts, which I think is some of it to me is like the reason of seeing it is that over most of the other stuff. I like these kind of like amateur projects though. I don't know if amateur is even the right word, but it does feel a bit like we'll make it out of this one. We're going to just do it and we'll see how it goes situation. And I can appreciate that. But yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all of them. So what do we have here in the end? A lot of stuff in the sea. I mean, it's part of the course, right? But like, we have this kind of. I think if I consider B to be the really part where I'm like, yeah, I really, really like these. My favorites of the situation. We have probably 8 of the 22. I think it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so 8 of 22. Not a bad metric, I suppose. You could do worse. You know, it's about half down the halfway line. But you know, I think it depends on the person because I think there's definitely capacity. There's probably a lot of people who like Minky Momo and the first Dirty Pair a lot more than I do. Definitely. The other works, maybe they like them a lot less. Let's put it that way. Bavistock. I think a Bavistock's end up probably way too high in the end. Maybe I want to put Greed on top of Bavistock. Yeah, probably. For me, at least. I don't know. It's all kind of like a bit of a mix at that end. But yeah, there we go. We did it. That was a fucking on to 1986. Eventually, I don't know. I don't think I'll rush that one. I wanted to. I spent like the last week just sort of like chiseling through my last bits of this. So I was really, really hankering on it. But I might be a bit more casual about the next part of the list because there's gonna be so much of it to cover. But it was interesting. It's interesting to see. Ultimately, while there's more than 84, but I think the consistency is probably overall better. In that, like, there's definitely a lot more stuff here overall that I really liked than in the 84, 83 period, where like there was some stuff where I was like, I appreciate what some of it was doing, but it didn't really come up fully formed, and it was just like a few of them that really, really stood out. I went for the Laserdisc. Now this might be a bit difficult. Maybe this makes it harder for some people, but I went for each of these images is mostly the Laserdiscs because they're square format. So I thought, well, because they're square format, I will try and get all the Laserdisc covers that I could find, and I'll fill them out that. Now some of them I don't think they had Laserdiscs, so I had to just do with whatever I could find. Usually just a poster, or like an image that I thought was representative. But for the most part, these are the Laserdisc images, and some of the Laserdiscs in 85 are a bit more, they're not quite as obvious as I would have liked them to be. I would have preferred some of them if they were just poster imagery, but some of them have like custom ones, and they're a bit like, I don't know if that reads as good as like the poster, the original iconic poster, but you know, it's fine. Some of them are more close to that. But yeah, I think the real winner today, outside of Angel's Egg, I suppose, is Area 88. That was a nice surprise coming out of that one, because I remember I first heard about Area 88 probably from like the Anime World Order podcast. That was a long time ago. I was listening to that one. I think it's still going these days. But back in university, I think it was. Back in university, I used to listen to it because I was like looking at anime podcasts. I found it very interesting to. I mean, the takes could be all over the place, but I thought it was really interesting as a pocket because it's a podcast of anime that's been running since 2006. So every possible take and error is kind of amalgamated in it, and like it is such a sign of the time situation. It's almost like an archaeological site looking through it. Like this kind of like this is the sort of perspective of this sort of like older anime fan in the 2000s, the mid 2000s, and it kind of moves into the mid 2010s. It's like it's just that perspective is so solidified in it. And they've talked about so many different things. And I think the first time I saw anyone talk about Area 88 was them. And I remember them talking about how like it didn't actually finish the adaptation of the manga, and a bit later on there was a TV anime version and stuff. I distinctly remember listening to that, like probably when I was on the bus going somewhere and hearing about the story and them talking about like dogfights and stuff, vaguely. in the past, and that was many years ago now. So I finally remedied not watching it. I guess it's an end of an era. Yeah, Anime World Order is a throwback. I think they are still going. Still bringing those takes from someone who grew up in the OVA era, let's say. Interesting to see that. And now to have finally finished it. I don't know if there's anything else I got to say, really. I think that might be the stream done. Honestly, I probably want to get some food. I'm getting hungry. But I can't believe I made it through 2 of these. I don't know if it's even possible to get through 86, but we'll try slowly but surely. Maybe one day I'll get through 86. I think the real goal, I don't know if I'll ever get past that. I may give up long before I ever get through all those years, but I mean, the goal would be to attempt to get through the whole of the 80s, which may be more achievable than going any further than that, but we'll see. What was the take out of this? I think it's interesting to me in some ways to see how quickly the OVA era fell apart. At the beginning, it was already like, the premise of how production works in the OVA era, the problems that are very apparent about it are already here. And I think that's why, as we go a little bit later on, when we get to probably like 87 or 88, we're going to notice a different type of OVA structure, which is the intentionally long-running OVA structure, where they don't have a lot of money per episode, but they do set it up in such a way where it's like they plan to run it for a fair amount of time. They're not going into it with the premise of like, is episode 1 going to sell? And then maybe we'll do more. It's like, no, they've got the pipeline ready and they're going to start firing out episodes in succession, and hopefully it will just keep going. I think the most infamous of that's probably going to be Legend of the Galactic Heroes, right? Because they ran that for almost a decade, and it's like, it was direct to order, right? But they did it. The money they had per episode, the resources they had per episode weren't very much, but they just kept running it and kept running it and kept running it for 110 episodes or whatever it is. And that it's rare you can get one that literally will run that infinite. But that was like one, and I think that sometimes the animation studio may change over the year depending on the project. I know some of the movies have different animation studios. I'm not sure about the main one. I think there might be parts where they move between studios. But that is an interesting side effect we'll see later, which probably comes in response to you've had a successful enough episode 1 of your OVA premise. Your production is stopped though. So now you need to get together a completely new production. You have to get everything back set. You have to find all those animators again, pull them all back, and get them running again. Which, yeah, that's a problem. Like you've stopped production. Now you have to restart production. You have to do all the faffing of creating a new pre-production to do the next episode. Which is where, things like Pat Labor also was like, well, instead of doing that sort of process, we'll just run 6 episodes at once at a smaller sort of like resources, and we'll just run the 6. And I think that becomes, again, something else what OVAs will start doing more, is like running a premise of 4 to 6 episodes. I imagine like Area 88 was set in stone. It's like, we're going to do 4 of these, or we're planning to just do all 4, and we'll just keep running. I imagine that's how it worked, because I don't imagine they were stopping and starting production for Perra. I think they probably did go into it with the mind that they were going to do at least 2 of these, and then that the sales were consistent enough, I suppose, they just kept going. So they never had to end production. I think that's how they would have ran something like that, considering it ran over like 2 years and there was not really a drop-off or anything. Was the OVA era related to the invention of the VHS and Betamax? I mean, very much so, in that like you can't have a home release market without those mediums. When it came to Japan, obviously Betamax probably less so is an anime format. I don't know. There probably is some Betamax anime, but I've never seen them myself. There probably does exist though. VHS won the format wars basically though, and that's how it went. And it was Laserdisc and VHS for the most part for anime. But in 83, you start to see that move. It's towards 82 and 83 where the Japanese home market for video really becomes apparent. In that before then, some people had VHS, they were very expensive. So they were quite expensive to buy. Some people had taped stuff off television, but it was a very slow transfer for people to actually go, okay, there's a market now and we're going to start selling things in Japan. And I think it's around 82, 83 that anime starts opening up to that. I can't remember if I've seen any that go before that, but yeah, it's around that time you start seeing them, and they start selling like reruns and stuff what people couldn't have possibly got beforehand. And the connection between that sort of period and people recording things is usually considered a core component of the otaku era beginning, because it gave the opportunity for super fans to record this stuff that before they could only talk about in passing, and they'd only ever see if it was on a rerun if they were lucky, and they could then record it and watch it again and again and again and pick out different animators and create those sort of features of anime otakuism specifically, because like manga doesn't have that problem, but anime being able to actually rewatch and reruns and learn about, and then the magazines coming at 78 as well, so you had these magazines and you had finally people could record it and do tape sharing. Tape sharing was a big part of the community building, is giving people tapes and sharing tapes and swapping tapes, and that's how you built something. And OVA is a response to that audience and realizing there is a gap in the market that we can appeal to, and we are missing out by not appealing to that, by doing something that we couldn't do on television, but maybe on a smaller scale we can release something specifically for that audience and advertise it in the places that they'd know they'd see it, like the magazines or in these sort of shops they would have went to and stuff like that. That kind of idea, that's where it comes from. Yeah. Well, the thing about OVAs though is that the bubble economy had no bearing on OVAs broadly, let's say, because the OVA bubble burst in 1987. It died very quickly. Like the oversaturation point by 87, that was like the down run. So what really happened with OVAs is you had this period, like the peak point of saturation here, it comes a little bit later, but like the peak point of saturation on sale return is 87, because as soon as the market started getting flooded by so many different versions, it became hard to stand out. That was a massive problem. And that's where the money the money pool started going down, and people started running more like adaptations that were popular as OVAs and maybe as series OVAs and stuff like that. Like the market started to sort of adapt to the limits of the medium, in the saturation point already being hit really hard very fast. Like the thing is, like, it was a niche audience, right? This was an audience that had a set number of people and a set number of interests, and it's not an audience you could expand really broadly, because these tapes were expensive, and you probably weren't going to get regular people to buy these tapes because they were expensive and they were specialist and they were animation. So like you had that audience was set, and there's only so much you can sell them, and that was always going to be the problem with the OVAs, is that they hit the cap too quick. And I mean, I don't think the bottom falling out on the economy there really helped so much, but people didn't really register that bottom falling out completely, especially in industries, until about 93. So what you see is that the numbers go up, and then at 93, it's like, oh shit, we're fucked. You just see a lot less produced. So there's like a done tick. But then it starts going up again, and it starts hitting like an equilibrium point where they decide as an industry that like these kind of shows will now go on late night television. So we're actually going to move the concept of OVA more to late night television, and what you have then left is this sort of like smaller subculture of OVA that's like starts dwindling and dwindling more and more and more, but usually becomes an offshoot of like popular anime. That's really the trajectory of it. But like quality wise, it's hard to really say, because money and animation aren't very connected. Usually the problem is more about schedule and other stuff. Like money can be a factor in terms of scale, because like instantly by like the time that Legend of the Galactic Heroes is coming out, yeah, it's like, all right, we need to really start cutting down the costs of making OVAs, and they're probably going more towards the pat labor model, where it's like, we're just going to give you TV level costs and then maybe run a batch and see if it does well. But then there might still be ones that are like, we're just running one and we'll see how it goes. Like Bow would be an example of that. But there are also some which is like, all right, we're going to try a really expensive version of an OVA once, like with Madhouse, when they put that money in, is it Demon City Shinjuku or something like that? That was, I think, the most expensive OVA made at that period. Had more theatrical level budget, but they don't think Madhouse went back to that model. I don't think that was a successful model for them in the end. So I think they didn't really move forward with that one. Yeah, so it is the situation with the market of the OVA. The problem has always been saturation point, because it's like, this is a niche audience. The entire premise here was like, we can sell to a niche audience that we could be losing revenue to, but that means we don't need to sell that many copies. For the longest time, right, 35,000 was the, at least to the general audience knowledge in terms of like Oricon and stuff, 35,000, somewhere around 28 to 35,000 was the most any OVA had sold that we know about. Maybe that's changed in the years afterwards. I think the next time they got that close to that number, though, at least on the Oricon figures, was with like Gundam in like the late 90s. I think it was like Endless Waltz, maybe. I think that one hit high numbers, but like generally an OVA wouldn't sell, most OVAs probably didn't sell more than 10,000 units if they were lucky. So like that, you know, that has to be taken into consideration, right? That might be considered a good job, but like a lot of OVAs probably only sold a couple thousand copies. And that's where it really came into, is like it was a real like bum rush. And that was like, maybe this will sell? I don't know. Like it was really fucking just throwing at the wall and hoping something happens. But a lot of the times it just failed. California Crisis will be a perfect example of that. Where it's just like, this is set up for another episode, but it never happened because it's probably only sold like 1,000 copies or something like that. Who knows? It's hard to even find those numbers these days. Yeah, I mean, California Crisis had that very California style. You can kind of see how some of that starts with Radio Fantasy, which was the director's prior work at Nishi Kubo. He did, there's definitely some like that California edge in that one as well, but like California Crisis takes that to like a newer level of sort of like pristineness, which is kind of nice to see. But maybe not very practical from an animation sense. A little maybe too heavy on the shading. Yeah, I mean, it is late night anime that took OVA out in the end, and that became the go-to place for it. That kind of story, that kind of setup, it became a safer bet.